Good evening from Central Pennsylvania and welcome to another Provident webinar. I'm your host, Ed Mann, Director of Training and Education for Provident. Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing Jim Leer. Jim reached out a few months ago when I solicited volunteers during a webinar and asked if anybody that was on the webinar would like to do a webinar with us. And Jim shot an email back to me and said he'd love to do a webinar for us. So that's what brought Jim about tonight. I recorded a Station 1902 podcast with Jim in August, and it first aired on September the 1st. A link to that podcast will be in your email you receive tomorrow. Jim, if you'll hold off on your introduction, let me get through these slides and I'll have you introduce yourself. So as we typically do, this is our Provident webinar series. Provident's been around since 1902. We started as an independent insurance agency in Pittsburgh. In fact, we're still an independently owned insurance agency in the Pittsburgh area. In 1928, Provident began serving volunteer firefighters with a customized accident health policy, actually just in the Pittsburgh area initially. Today, we do business across the United States to include Canada. We provide volunteer firefighters, combination career firefighters, emergency medical responders with a multitude of programs. We also now offer the same programs to our friends in blue from law enforcement. We're celebrating our 7th year as a top insurance employer as rated by the Insurance Business of America magazine. Some of the programs we offer are accident health program. If you are an accident health client, you and your immediate members of your family are able to use our first responder assistance program. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're confidential calls if you should need some help. We also offer a 24-hour accidental death and dismemberment policy. Many of our customers have purchased that policy to offer a benefit to their members when they're doing things not associated with a fire department. So you might be out hunting, fall out of your tree stand, die from an accidental death. It would pay a benefit to your family. We have a group term life policy that we offer, a critical illness and cancer policy that actually covers cancer, heart attack, stroke, and renal failure. And something I forgot to mention under the accident health policy, several of our states now, we are able to offer a cancer rider as part of the policy. If you're diagnosed with cancer, the only cancer that is excluded in that policy, that rider, is skin cancer. If you're diagnosed, there is no presumption and it would pay the benefit. Finally, we have our Fire Plus property and casualty insurance program. And if you're a property and casualty client, you have access to our Fire Plus Academy with over 800 courses. And all of the full-length EMS courses are approved nationally for continuing education. Next month, on October the 28th, I'll be hosting Tim Tharp, CE and founder of the First Responder Resilience Network. The title of his program, PPE for the Mind, the essential gear you don't get issued. If there are leaders here tonight, I would suggest that you join this webinar at the end of October because you're going to be able to gather a lot of good information on the things you should be doing to help your members before they get into trouble with mental or behavioral health. Tonight, as I indicated earlier, Jim Leer will be doing a webinar on gaseous-powered vehicles. And I got to tell you, when we went through the podcast, I learned some new things and also got a good refresher on some things I was taught years ago about that particular subject. So I'm going to stop sharing. Jim, if you want to take a few minutes, turn your camera on and introduce yourself to our listeners.
Okay, thank you very much, Ed. Let me get the sharing the screen here. Got my video shared. Okay, so if I'm right, you should see my slides up there right now, if I'm correct. So
I don't see them yet.
Now do you see?
There we go.
There we go. We got it now.
All right, I'm going to turn my camera off.
Okay.
And mute my microphone as well.
Okay. And also, I'm going to shut my camera off too and everything too. So as long as everyone can see the slide presentation, that's the most important thing and everything too. So as Ed said, my name is Jim Leer. I come from actually, let me stop there. Let me get this again. Take two. Okay. Nope. Okay. Sorry about that. Let me stop something here. I try to do a little bit of a shortcut. So my name's why I get this all set up and everything. My name is Jim Lear. I'm with Penn National Insurance and everything. I'm from southwestern Pennsylvania. So what I'm going to go over tonight is gaseous powered vehicles. Okay. For some reason, are my slides advancing, Ed? Now they are. Okay. So my name, as I said, my name is Jim Lear. I'm with Southwestern Pennsylvania. With the Somerset Regional Volunteer Fire Department, and I'm located on the southwestern side of the Commonwealth. All right, so a little bit about my theory of teaching. All right, I feel one of the best ways to teach is to learn and also do it and learn to do it and teach it. So that's pretty much my philosophy with my teaching. All right. So a little bit on this slide about the scope of this class. As Ed says, this is a gaseous vehicle. So we're going to basically, you see the slides here, you can see the different categories. As you all know, we've had more than enough classes on electric type vehicles. I'm going to primarily focus on gaseous vehicles and those four specific fuels within that yellow thing. I'm not going to go in hydrogen gas or ammonia. All right. Also, I'm not going to go into covering any fill stations. All right, so if we go ahead, can we go ahead and do the polling if that's possible?
Yeah, let me turn that on.
Okay.
All right, launching it now.
So if you would, please take time to do these polling questions, all right, so that we can kind of give a little bit of an idea of our exposure within the class.
Looks like we have 146 people here currently. So yeah, that'd be great if we could get almost everyone to participate.
Yeah, let's try to get as many as we can in here. Sam, whenever you want to end that sharing and everything, that's fine too. It'll
Okay.
pop them up and everything.
Yeah, folks, we're trying something we've never done before with one of these. So help us out and take the polling questions. There's only four of them and they're all multiple choice. So it's pretty simple.
Yeah, check all applicable. I'm just kind of curious. And one thing about these incidents as you filling these out, they're a high risk but low frequency type incident. Some of you may or may not have them in your area, or you may not be aware that you have these in the response area. I know when I do this class throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I've taught it. It seems to me a lot of times people don't really know how to recognize these vehicles until after they take the class and they start to become more aware of what's coming through their community. How many
It's
are
like
we at now,
we're
Sam?
like almost 70% participated. Okay, now we're at 70.
Okay, good. Anxious to see a little bit what everyone experiences have
Yeah,
been or what they have in their response areas.
let's give it one more minute.
Okay,
We're at 75%.
150 people. So let's see what we can get here.
While they're finishing up, I see our friend from the Philippines has joined us again. He's become a regular on our webinars. I'm trying to talk to bosses into let me go there and do a class.
Someone from Amsterdam as well. Hello, Jetty. Thanks for joining us. Probably this morning for you, or very early morning for you, or late night. Okay, late night's 1 in the morning, I imagine.
All right, Sam, I think
All
you're
right,
in
I think we're
on.
good. Yeah, we're at 80, a little over 80% participated. So I'll end the poll and
Okay,
I
that's
think we
wonderful.
can share the results. Let's see.
I wonder if I have to stop. So, okay. I don't know. Can everyone see the poll results?
They should be able to.
Okay. All right. So let's just take a look at this. So the first question was determine of what your exposure were these types of vehicle. So out of the group, 12% have no exposure. Okay. So maybe hopefully at the end of the night, you may realize you do have exposure. 44% is they have exposure with some kind of a pickup and delivery, either products or garbage. All right. 73% passing through interstate or highway system. 28% where you have these vehicles that are staged or operated from within your response area. So you have parking lots with multiple vehicles in there. You may have a repair shop. 33% have fueling stations. So that just gives a little bit of an idea. So some of the things I kind of expected. So as we look at here, we go down to question number 2. What types of vehicles are we seeing out there? Say, okay, 9% no exposure. Next, school buses, 34%, okay, of the attendees see that. Public transit, which is pretty common in my area, 37% have some kind of exposure. As far as like a shuttle service, such as airports, hotels, or resorts or taxis, 22 taxi services, 22%. Garbage collection is 42%. Okay. Local delivery, such as UPS or other similars, 49%. Long haul trucking, 30%. Private use, where you have no deliver or hauling, we have 31%. Then we get into such as like service businesses, such as plumbers, lawn care. So it's pretty much all across the board that it's similar results and everything too on that. So that provides a nice, interesting thing that we're getting anywhere from light to medium to heavy duty vehicles into it. So then we look at question number 3. What types of incidents has your department had with these? Okay, with these type of vehicles. 44% of people say none at all. Okay, so they have not had any incidents. They're passing through the area. 24% was some kind of a fire or explosion event. All right, a leak type event was 31%. Motor vehicle accidents or other incidents where we have no fire or no leak, where it's basically a collision, there's no damage to the fuel system, is 44%. All right, so that gives pretty much all even across the board on that. Okay, then if we go down here to the last part, is which types of fuel does your department have exposure? Of course, 14%, none at all. All right. So we're kind of taking a look at this, and this is what I kind of expected. Propane, 74% of the respondents have some kind of a propane powered type vehicles that are in their area or passing through the areas. Second is compressed natural gas, CNG at 61%. And the final is liquefied natural gas, 46%. All right, so we'll kind of see how a lot of these kind of match up and everything too. So that's some wonderful thing here. If it's all right, Ed and Sam, we can close those out. I can close them out from my end. If
Yep,
that's all right with you.
sounds good.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move on here a little bit. All right, so one thing I just want to make sure for those who aren't attending this, you will get a copy of the PDF of this presentation. But I want to just make sure, like, none of this stuff I'm using is anything really new. So these are some of various resources. Number one, it was the NFPA manual on gaseous fueled vehicles. We're going to talk about the information booklet on the right a little bit later, which are known as emergency response guidebooks. All right. Another one is Hexagon Agility, which is a major fleet provider of these types of vehicles. They have an excellent first responder guide on CNG and LNG type vehicles. All right. As thinking here, we're going to see some photos and some videos. The intent of this media is not to do any criticism. It's solely for educational and discussion purposes and to demonstrate things. None of my videos or pictures are meant to criticize or reflect negatively on the individuals, company, or emergencies depicted in there if you do identify who they are. All right, so I want to just go in a quick Hazmat 101 view. One thing we're going to find about some of these vehicles is that we're kind of missing our foundation stuff of what we've been taught on hazmat, that we're not applying to types of these vehicles. So for the past year, I've been trying to bring up a gentleman. His name's Ludwig Benner. Sure, many are familiar with him. Hopefully, majority are familiar with him. And Ludwig was considered the father of hazmat modern day thinking. Okay, so he developed a couple different things: the Decide thing, the Gembo, the Trace'em. So these are some things that he developed. And a little back history: Ludwig worked for the Department of Transportation, or sorry, the National Highway Safety Transport Association. And one thing that he was doing these incident investigations involving these hazardous material incidents on the highway and other transportation, and he was noticing a lot of firefighters were getting killed or seriously injured at these incidents. All right, so he started to investigate this a little bit. Another fire service person that some of you may have heard of was Francis Brannigan. Okay, Francis Brannigan and Ludwig Benner both were in the Northern Virginia, Maryland area, DC area, and they taught at the Montgomery County Community College at the fire science program. So basically, Brannigan challenged Ludwig Benner to figure this out. And basically, Ludwig Benner came out and basically said that, hey, firefighters are doing what they're being taught to do in their training at these hazardous materials: arrive on scene and attack and extinguish the fire, as opposed where they should be stopping, evaluating the situation, and taking the best actions. So that's where he came out with the Decide model, where you sort of have a system to follow it. Another thing that he came out was just having an understanding. Okay, we've all heard that hazardous materials do not become a problem until they get outside their container. So he developed this Gembo model, which basically outlines the failure of a container, the type of stresses, just sort of to give the responder an actual understanding of what's going on. And we'll see as we go through this how this ties back. And some of the things that kind of develop out of this things, which was known as risk-based response. All right, so some of you hear this a lot in hazmat classes. So according to NFPA 470, it's a systematic process to analyze a problem where we analyze the container, the product, the environment, and the cause. We identify and assess the hazards, and we evaluate the potential consequences. So a lot of this is based off of Ludwig's model. Okay, on the left is something that was developed by the IFF, is another risk-based response where we analyze, plan, implement, and evaluate. All right, so basically this, we're going to be talking about these gaseous vehicles, is slowing things down, taking time to identify, get an understanding of what's going on. And we're going to learn on one particular type of these vehicles is if we do our attack and extinguish what we've been taught, it can lead us into a pretty big problem. All right, so as you guys are going to see here under the NFPA 470, we talk about the product, the container, the environment, and the cause, and we apply the facts, science, and circumstances. So pretty much my presentation's going to follow this flow. We're going to have an understanding of the container, We're going to have an understanding of the product, and we're going to have an understanding of the environment. Okay, depending where the container fails, the product release and the environment plays on the role, and have an understanding of the cause. Okay, and we want to apply the facts and science and circumstances to the incident. And here's just another example of that. I'm not going to go through this, but more particularly, you'll see as we go through this about the container product, environment cause. The environment is just taking a look. What's our surrounding? As you know, if these incidents occur on a busy highway, it's a completely different environment than these occurring on a country back road. Have an understanding of the cause, okay, of these incidents. All right, so let's dive into the product side of this. Okay, first thing I want to stress to you is we can have dual fuel technology where these three fuels could be used along with diesel. All right, so just to be aware of that. All right. So, and I said here, basically a very simple biofuel natural gas vehicle where it runs on a gasoline fuel, but we can flip of a switch, we can run on compressed natural gas. So just have an understanding that it could be more than one type of fuel system on the vehicle. All right. So we're going to talk about all three of these gases, as you know, are flammable gases. When we get to flammable gases, there's two types. We have compressed and liquefied flammable gases. Under liquefied, we break those down farther. We have liquefied gases that are formed through compressing, and we have liquefied gases that are formed through cooling. So we have a little bit of an understanding of that. Here's a simple table. I'm not going to read through every single part of this. All right. So essentially, compressed natural gas and liquefied natural gas are basically natural gas. Okay. But you can notice compressed natural gas is a gas, liquefied natural gas is a liquid, and it becomes a liquid through cooling, where they cool the gas to a negative 195 degrees to 260 degrees to make it a liquefied gas. Then we get to LPG as propane. That's liquefied through pressurization. All right. You can see the UN numbers are different for all three. The ERG guidebook numbers are essentially the same. We understand a little bit about the flammable range, the flash point, the auto ignition, the vapor density, as we've been taught. Natural gas is lighter than air. It's going to rise and dissipate. Propane or liquid petroleum gas is heavier than air, and it's going to stay low and to the ground and collect in low-lying areas. The one thing about liquefied natural gas, all right, because it's cold, it's a cryogenic liquid. So initially, when it comes out, it's going to be heavier than air, but once it gets warmed up, it's going to rise. All right. So we kind of take a look at the expansion ratio between liquefied natural gas. Okay. LNG has an expansion ratio of 2.5 times of liquefied petroleum gas. All right. Then we kind of look down here across the thing. Obviously, all these are flammable gases. So fire and explosion are a main concern. Compressed natural gas, one of the hazards is high pressure associated with the containers and the fuel system. All right. And we'll talk a little bit about what that high pressure is. Under liquefied natural gas, it's a cryogenic liquid. So we all have been taught you get a cryogenic liquid on you extremely cold and what it can do to the body. All right. And another thing that we're going to learn about liquefied natural gas is what is known as rapid phase transition. All right. LPG, we have fire explosion. Liquefied petroleum gas is a cold in its liquefied state, but it's not considered cryogenic, so it could cause some kind of a frostbite type injury. All right. Another terminology that some of you may or may not be familiar is which is known as RNG, or renewable natural gas. This is basically natural gas that is taken through the decomposition of municipal waste. Okay, sewage, sludge, or other types of waste that forms natural gas. Okay, so it's known as renewable natural gas, and that gas can either be put into a compressed natural gas or a liquefied natural gas for a vehicle. Okay. So for example, in my area in Somerset County, we have a state prison that is located near a landfill. It receives gas from that landfill to operate the boiler system for the prison. So that's an example of RNG, or renewable natural gas, in use. All right. For those who may be a history buff, if you Google this incident, I'm not going to go into it, but this is an LNG incident that happened in 1944 in Ohio. So if you're sort of a history buff or anything like that, you can go back and take a look at the East Ohio incident in Cleveland with their experience with liquefied natural gas. As you see, it killed 130 lives and pretty much wiped out a whole neighborhood. All right, so we talked about the product. Let's go in and learn a little bit about the container. Hazardous material does not become a problem until it gets outside of its container. All right, so very simply, just breaking this down as I did before. As you see, it's compressed natural gas has a service pressure of 3,600 psi with a maximum working pressure of 4,500 psi. So you can see that high pressure hazard we have. LNG and liquefied petroleum gas have lower operating pressures, okay, on that. So then going across to the next line, this is something that we got to have an understanding about these systems. All right, pressure relief devices, as we are familiar with, are devices that, if to relieve pressure in a container before the whole container fails. So that pressure release device could be temperature activated or pressure activated. So you take a look here at CNG, all right, compressed natural gas is a temperature activated pressure relief device. LNG and LPG, or propane, are both pressure activated pressure reducing devices. All right. Then we get a little bit down to containers. In the containers, under compressed natural gas, just as many of you seen in the fire service, all right, where we started out with the steel cylinders, went to aluminums, to carbon fiber and everything too. The same thing has happened with the compressed natural gas. There's 4 types, okay, and we'll go over a little bit more about those. All right, the LNG, okay, if you remember, I told you it is a natural gas that is liquefied by cooling. So that gas needs to be maintained at cooling state. So what it does, it is put into a container that is basically a double wall thermos type container to maintain that liquid at its cold temperature. Okay, there's an inner tank which contains the pressure, then there's an outer tank. And the idea is this can remain fuel for 7 to 10 days. All right, then we get over liquefied petroleum gas, basically the carbon steel tank that we see with at a above ground propane tank. Okay, it's equipped with the same type of devices. The systems are closed. Okay, it keeps the propane liquid state, and as with all these containers, CNG, LNG, liquefied petroleum gas, they do consider the design of impact damage on these involved in the incident. Okay, so for example, if you look at a liquefied petroleum gas container is 20 times puncture resistant as gasoline tanks and able to withstand 4 times the pressure. All right, so we already talked about, as we see with the compressed natural gas, we have a high pressure hazard. With LNG and LPG, or propane, we have a Bellevue hazard. All right, which we'll do a real quick refresher on that. All right, this is just a summary of the different types of tanks. All right, or for compressed natural gas. The type 4 is the more common. Obvious, it's lighter. The idea is that you can put more cylinders on it. It's lighter. It has a polyethylene liner, a composite shield, a significant weight savings. So type 4 and type 3 are more to the common. And we're going to talk a little bit about these behavior of these containers when they are exposed to fire. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about compressed natural gas. Okay, so the type 3 and 4 overwrap is a low conductor of heat, resulting in a nominal rise in content pressure when exposed to heat and fire. So that wrap if you go back here, this wrap that is on these containers has ignites at 650 degrees. Okay, so what happens as these tanks get exposed to fire? They get, as obvious, we're going to get extreme heat. We're going to get above 650 or more on these. The fibers start to weak. Okay, another thing that they talk about this is if we start throwing our cold fire streams on this, that further erodes the carbon fiber wrap on these containers. All right, so that's one concern. And the second concern I'm going to emphasize as we get through this presentation is about the CNG, where it has a temperature activated pressure relief device on it. That water could be very detrimental to that. The service life is 15 to 20 years on these containers. All right. As I said, we'll get this into a little bit more. So these containers have a pressure relief device, the CNG, a minimum of 2. There could be 1, and they're temperature activated, anywhere between 212 degrees to 200, and they're non-reclosing. So once heat gets to them, they activate them. The valves, the pressure relief device stays open until it burns off all the gas. Okay. We're going to talk about how these things vent, making sure they vent upwards. Some of the older systems may do that, may not do that. The protective caps, and also each cylinder in these compressed natural gas have a individual cylinder that could be manual, electric solenoid, which is the most common, or a combination of manual and electric solenoid. All right, so we're going to talk a bit about location of these containers. All right, so CNG, we're going to start with that. If we remember back to our poll, was number 2 on our list. All right, so these CNG containers can be mounted on the side. They could be front mounted. They could be side mounted. Okay, they could be front body. They could be roof mounted. They could be mounted behind the cab. Various locations they can put these containers on the vehicles to determine the specific container. All right. As said here, it could be on these garbage trucks. It could be a tailgated mount type of system. Pickup trucks, it could be in the bed of the pickup truck. In smaller light vehicles, it could be in the trunk of the vehicle. All right, with these CNG. So you see these CNG containers can pretty much be anywhere depending on the type of vehicle and the application. Okay, LNG, liquefied natural gas, essentially they're going to be, majority of them are going to be mounted on the saddle, just same as the saddle tanks of the diesel truck. So you can see this LNG container here, and you can see the cutaway where you have that inner tank and you have that gap and you have that outer tank to form sort of that vacuum or dewar type container to maintain the coldness of the gas. All right, so some things about the LNG. LNG venting is considered normal, okay? So as the day heats up, if this thing was filled early in the morning or late at night and it sets and the sun comes up, the sun's got to heat it up a little bit, and it may start to vent off out of. It's not a problem unless it's considered excessive. Also on these tanks, you're going to see, and I'm going to show you some upcoming pictures, there's a red liquid valve, which is basically the valve that takes the fuel to the engine. Then there's a gray valve, which is basically normally closed, and it's open when fueling to relieve pressure. So as you fill this thing, you have to open the valve, then put fuel into it to relieve the pressure. As with any container, has a backflow valve on it, has an excess flow valve that only allows the gas to flow in one direction. And if it's too excessive, such the pipe gets sheared, it'll shut itself off. Okay. The key thing on this LNG too is you're going to find a pressure gauge on that. The pressure gauge is not an indicator of fuel level. Okay. The gauge could read 0, and an empty tank could have 230 psi, and the various fuel lines on these containers. All right, so the more common that I've seen is the saddle mounted tank. It could be on one side or both sides of the truck. One thing about LNG can fuel over CNG and liquefied petroleum gas. LNG is more for heavy duty, long road trucking. Okay, that's where you're going to see this more common. propane and CNG are going to be more for local delivery. Compressed natural gas can have some long hauling in it. On the right is just another tank. I believe that's from another country, but the more common is we're going to find these as saddle mounted tanks on the side of the truck. All right, the liquefied petroleum or propane, all right, on the right, you can see it's just a small propane container that you may see in somebody's backyard with some of the basically fill points, outlets, and everything too. On the left is basically what they call a donut type container. That's something that could be mounted in the trunk of a vehicle in the spare tire area, or on a pickup truck in the area underneath the pickup truck where there may be a spare tire. Okay, so you can see the different types of containers associated with that. Okay, so with the propane type containers, it could be mounted under, it could be mounted in the bed of the pickup truck, it could be mounted in the trunk of the vehicle, or it could be under the undercarriage of the vehicle between the rails, which you may see on buses. Okay, the one thing to understand too is propane or LPG containers will never be mounted on the roof of a vehicle, because we understand the vapor density of propane. If we have a leak, where is it going to go? It's going to seek low. So if it's on top of a bus, where is the propane going to leak? It's going to go into the passenger area. So that's why propane is always going to be in a lower part of the vehicle. All right. So we went over the containers. I've covered a little bit about pressure relief devices, but I just want to go under this. This is some critical things we have to have an understanding with these vehicles, particularly with the CNG vehicles. All right. So what I want to do is show you a quick video here. This video is a garbage truck that caught fire. It's a compressed natural gas vehicle that caught fire in Chesapeake, Virginia. So one of the things I want you to watch is sort of the behavior, the fire behavior of this thing. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start this video. Sorry for the video, the commercials and everything. So.
Paid for with Pennsylvania taxpayer dollars.
Started. Tidewater Fiber.
Recycling truck caught fire and burned a home in Chesapeake. A witness sent us this picture from the scene on Las Gaviotas Boulevard. Here's a look at the damage. TFC Recycling says the fire crew, when they had the truck, it released its natural gas tanks. If that wouldn't have happened, it could have been worse. 10 on your side's Matt Gregory has the latest from the scene. Matt?
Stephanie and Anita. Right behind me, construction crews and restoration crews began working just a little bit ago. They got here this afternoon to get the house back to normal. You can take a look at it. What it looks like is almost like a flamethrower shot onto the side of the house and just engulfed the front of the home. A man who saw the whole thing happen told me that it looked like something out of a movie. It was something he's never seen before, and he sent us these pictures as the fire started. Tidewater Fiber Corporation Recycling says a spark turned into a fire, and the fire ignited because of a hydraulic leak that had spread throughout the truck. TFC says this truck is a natural gas-powered vehicle, and when the fire started, that caused the pressure in the tanks to rise. And as the gas tanks have a pressure release valve, as that pressure rose, they released their gas. The COO of the company says the release valve prevents a bigger explosion. Unfortunately, the release shot gas out of the sides, taking the flames with it.
It sounded like a blowtorch, just a giant rushing noise of flames, and they were blowing directly on that house. And it didn't take 10 seconds for that whole house to catch on fire.
Now, the COO of TFC Recycling says that they will be covering with their insurance company all of the damages for the homeowner. The homeowners were both fine, and so was the driver. Coming up, we'll talk to a man who saw the whole thing as it happened, and he says it's a miracle no one died, and we think after you hear his story, you might feel the same way. In Chesapeake, Matt Gregory, 10 on your side.
Okay. So, it's just one part of the video. I just want to show you a little bit about the behavior of these types of devices. So let me get the slide started back up here again. All right. So the one thing about these pressure relief devices, all right, they're either activated by pressure or temperature or a combination of both. The idea is that these pressure devices release the pressure and before the pressure gets to the container and we have more of a catastrophic or major failure of the container. All right. So the thing we have to understand with these pressure relief devices, all right, as you see in that video, we can have jet fires, we can have gas releases. You saw that house, let's just say 40 or 50 feet back, that how the torch caught to the house. Okay, so we have an exposure concern we need to do on this too. The thing also to understand, don't get all happy or think we're all good to go, because it does not mean because the pressure device is activated that the container is not going to fail. If there's a failure of that pressure relief device, or if the pressure exceeds the capabilities of that pressure relief device, the container can fail. Okay, there may also be stresses that may cause failure to that container before it meets the parameters of the operation of pressure relief device. Okay, the thing is, have an understanding that they're container specific. Operation may not release pressure from other containers in the system. So we're going to see, particularly on these CNG or compressed natural gas, there could be 4, 5, or 6 containers on these vehicles, but the pressure relief device only covers one cylinder at a time. Okay, so you got to have an understanding of that. Real quick, this article here on the right is a good information. If you want to get it, it's like 2 or 3 pages. It provides you with a good overview of cylinder pressure relief devices. Have a good understanding of their application, operation, and everything too on that. All right. This is just I'm not going to go through this, but this is just a quick table that sort of goes over these. So very simple, thermally activated devices. The heat melts a fusible type metal or anything like that. We have the gas release. Okay, it does not reseal back up. Okay, once it's open, it's open. It's a non-reclosing device. Okay, another thing to have an understanding on these temperature activated devices, depending how they are installed. If they're installed somewhere on the tank and the heat hasn't gotten to it, it could potentially fail the container due to the positioning of the fire. Also, these devices may be minimized or ineffective or not go off as soon due to cold temperatures or wind current operations. All right, so temperature is temperature activated, non-reclosing. The next type device is a pressure activated, where an internal pressure in the tank operates a spring, it opens it up, it releases the pressure. If the pressure goes below and has no more thermal type stress, it will shut itself back up again. All right, so just a quick thing between the 3 containers, CNG, temperature activated, but also on the compressed natural gas, which we're going to talk about, is the fuel management system. There is a pressure activated device on the fuel management system, which is basically a box down more closer to the cab or engine area. LNG, you can see, has a primary pressure relief device at 230 degrees and a secondary at 350 degrees. And on liquefied petroleum gas, it could be anywhere from 250 to 350 PSI. All right, and this just shows you sort of the difference. Temperature, it has a fusible material in it, and the pressure activated has basically a spring on it that operates to open, close as the pressure increases. All right, so you can kind of see here a little bit of a diagram. All right, here's a little bit better of a picture. So this is 4 CNG containers. All right, you can see as the line comes out, there could be no valves on these on the valves for the pressure relief devices. So if you kind of see here, it comes out, here's one pressure relief device, and here's the second one. And it's kind of a gamble depending where the flame impingement is. It may not trip these things in a timely manner. Okay, so for example, maybe this back tank, if the fire's coming from the front, it may not get to that pressure relief device as soon as this back tank. And you'll see here, each one of these only does that. So it only releases gas from one cylinder. So just don't feel that, hey, I have this one cylinder, its device is operating and it's burned its gas off. I still have 3 other cylinders that could potentially fail or activate the pressure relief device. All right. So one of the earlier things when these trucks came out, there was no rule on how they could discharge. Like some of the trucks could discharge out the side of that. And as a fire service, we're like, well, time out. That can cause some serious harm. So now they're requiring that they go up in an upward direction in somewhat of a safe distance. So so you can see the various examples on these trucks. You can see here to the right one, you still have one that goes to the bottom because this is a roll off back thing. The one thing is you got to make sure is, especially if these things activate, you make note where the torching flames come out, okay? That you don't put any personnel or any apparatus in the area of that. A lot of the guidelines say 80 to 100 feet back from these pressure relief devices. I'm more a little bit about, okay, let's do the 330 feet with the ERG and kind of take it from there, be a little safer, because if we have some kind of a failure, that container, that 80 or 100 feet may not be adequate. All right, so some clues. The discharge ports are covered in a red wrapping like this. So this is what you may see on a CNG with the pressure relief devices on that. On an LNG, okay, LNG can come up. It doesn't have any plastic device on that, but you can see how this device, and you can see on the right where we have sort of that natural off-gassing that you can have, which could be normal part of the operation that you need to understand, okay? Still, if we do get called to a truck stop and one of the things off-gassing, we just got to make the determination. Is there a failure in the device or a stress on the container, or is this just a normal, or is this just normal operation that there's nothing wrong with the system? It'll eventually close itself up as they start moving on, all right? Also on here, we can also have one down here on the container itself, a pressure relief device indicated here with the red wrapping. On propane, okay, one thing is propane with the spring operated. On the buses, it's generally got to be down right on the tank. So you're going to have something underneath of it. All right. Quick review, especially with fire stream applications. Okay, as firefighters, what do we want to do? We see fire. Okay, we take that Chesapeake, Virginia incident where they basically left that thing burn off before they did anything. And that's the idea, because if we start applying water stream to that fire, we start getting onto the tank and we start applying water to the temperature reduced device, we cool that and we prevent those fusible alloys or that fusible device from reaching its activation temperature. And if we prevent that from happening, the container, and we get a catastrophic failure. Okay. On the pressure activated, we got to be careful where we're directing our water that we don't do any icing or anything formed on the pressure relief device. All right, so components and systems, a little bit of an idea about component systems, CNG. All right, we got to have an understanding here. Like you take a look at there's a high pressure side of these containers. There's high pressure lines. You can see that. Then it comes down here and it goes to a fuel management system that reduces the pressure to 125 to 135 PSI. All right. And this just shows you one of this pressure fuel management system. The key thing is right here in the center is what's known as a quarter turn-off valve. That is for us in the fire service as part of the immobilization and disabling vehicle as a valve that we operate. All right, on that. And it said the fuel lines are going to be some kind of a stainless steel type thing. There may be some flexible hose in those. All right, so if we kind of take a look at this garbage truck, up on top, we have the containers, CNG containers. So roughly in the red, we could say we have a high pressure hazard. Then we come down here and we get to the fuel management system and we get into the low pressure. So just a little bit of a visualization. All right. We talked about the valves. The valves could be manually operated. They could be electrically operated with the solenoid valve, or they could be a combination of both. So with the solenoid, basically when the driver turns the key on, it opens the solenoid valves, allows gas to come out of that cylinder. If you shut the vehicle off and disable it and they're electronic solenoids, it shuts down the gas at the cylinder. Okay. And as to each valve also has a shut off valve on it. Okay. Just you can kind of see, just to be familiar with, this could be part of your size up, seeing how the piping runs with these, the stainless steel piping, the shut off valves. Okay, give you a little bit of an indicator what this looks like. On LNG, basically you have the tank, you have a vaporizer that basically, and a heater that basically takes that liquefied gas, heats it up, gets it to a gas for it to burn within the engine. Okay, LNG, very obviously, the size and shape depends on how much overall fuel that it is hauling. So this just shows you a little bit about the working. So here's the red shutoff valve. Here's sort of a venting valve right here, and you can see what the containers look like. All right. Down here is where the pressure relief device is. So there's a 350, 230. Here's a red line. Okay. All these photos I'm showing you here are from that Hexagon Agility emergency response. It gives you things. And you also notice a lot of these valves are labeled. All right. Just more things that just shows you a little about the configuration, the valves, the gauges, and the vents on these systems. All right. And just more things on that. One thing I failed to mention when I was talking about LNG versus CNG versus LPG. Okay, as we know, natural gas in its normal state is odorless, tasteless. So when we put it into use, we add an odorizer to it. Okay, so we're familiar with our home, and the same with propane. So CNG and LPG type vehicles will have odorized gas. LNG gas, due to being a cryogenic liquid, it is non-odorized. So as part of the requirements on these trucks, they have sensors that are installed inside and outside the vehicle, and they will give alarm there, 20 to 30% LEL, okay, video alarm. So that'll be also an indicator that you have a potential leak, is these leak detection alarms that are located. And this is just on the LNG, and that's because it's not an odorized gas. Okay, so you can kind of see here, maybe in the cab. Okay, so it shows you the key on a lot of this stuff, that, hey, liquefied natural gas, and we shouldn't be using odor as any indicator of the presence or not presence, the migration, or the severity of the leak. Okay, and that's where we're going to talk a little bit more about detection and monitoring. All right, and this is just something from Agility and everything, just talking a little bit about the CNG, LNG. You'll notice here with the CNG, they actually have an alert system that alerts that those cylinders are exposed to 165 degrees, which we go back to that carbon fiber wrap, or whatever you want to call it, on those tanks. Okay, propane, okay, as I pretty much told you, pretty simple closed system. You'll never have these things mounted on the roof of the vehicle because of it being a heavier than air gas. All right, so we're pretty obvious. So we're going to talk a little bit about BLEVE hazard. I mentioned BLEVE hazard for liquefied petroleum gas, or propane, and LNG. Okay, so real quick review on BLEVEs. We basically, for a BLEVE to occur, we need a liquid, we need a closed container, and we need that liquid to be heated above its boiling point, which increases pressure, and we need some kind of a structural failure to that container. All right. Obviously, if we have an LPG type vehicle, the BLEVE hazard exists. Okay. Not going to go much into that. Okay. But the one thing I want to hit on is LNG. Okay. LNG, this is depends where you read it. Some say BLEVE hazard, some say no BLEVE hazard. The reason some say it's no BLEVE hazard is due to the double-walled container design and the cryogenic that kind of limits that exposure of flame impingement on the container itself and the liquid. Does not mean it's not going to happen. Okay. So for example, if there's some kind of a stress or mechanical failure on that container, okay, that can increase the potential of a levy hazard on there. So always consider a levy hazard associated with these vehicles. All right. Before I get moving into, kind of went over the product, the container, a little bit about the vehicles themselves. One thing that when Ed and I did the podcast, talk a little bit about leadership, okay, on this. So what can leadership do? Okay, most important, training and education. Okay, can you get this? Is just a very high level type class, give you a little bit of understanding of that. I'm going to give you some additional resources out there that if you want a more of a detailed or hands-on program. So training and education is important. Many of you expressed that you have these facilities, either refueling, staging or parking, or operation. Do a facility tour. Go to them. Okay. Meet these people, especially these fleet people. Have an understanding. Hey, if I do have an incident or do a fire, let them understand what your capabilities, your limitations, okay, what they can do. Don't have your first handshake with these people when things are going bad on the street. Have that talk with these people before incident happens. Vehicle orientation. If you're able to get one of these vehicles to come to your fire station, back it in the apparatus bay or somewhere in the lot and allow your people to just to look at this, okay, familiarize yourself with the operation, okay. And another thing is your annual hazmat training, okay. A lot of the stuff as you see ties back to our basic hazmat 101 stuff. Just don't check the box each year because we're just doing it because the chief says we need to do this. Take some time, do a little bit more effort with your annual hazmat refresher programs. Okay, some hands-on training. There may be more, but this is the more of I'm familiar with. There's Safeware, there's responder training, there is also Tim Ferretti. These are various companies that provide more detailed hands-on training, longer courses associated with these programs. Okay. Let me go forward a little bit too on that too. Also, we'll come back to those slides, especially with a lot of these things. We need to be able to, if these things are damaged, and containers are damaged by fire or mechanical, we just can't tell the tow operator just take these and drag the vehicle somewhere. We may have to have our hazmat team if they have the capabilities, or a third-party response department or someone come do it, or the fleet. But there's various types of these systems out there that you could see where you have these mission packs where you can override the valve to off gas these containers to make them safe. Okay, different types of kits. Here's another one, flaring and a vending system. Just to make sure of this, hey, if we have this tank that's severely damaged and we don't want to risk towing this somewhere, we need to make it safe at the scene. All right, so just throwing that out for extra resources. Now let's just back up here a little bit. All right, as I said, building those stakeholder relationships, okay? Get relationship with your fleets or user. Have an understanding with your tow and recovery services that they just can't come hook these vehicles up and tow them back to their yard. They need to understand there's hazards associated with this. Your hazardous material team, find out about their capabilities, or a cleanup company. All right, information. All right, one thing on a lot of these or some of these vehicles, have you seen with the Hexagon Agility and some of them, they have an emergency response guide with them. Okay, some are 20 pages, some are 1 to 2 pages. They're basically a guide for us first responders that give us some general guidelines, what to do, not to do, and how to identify the component. All right. I'm a big proponent with all this alternative energy that we have in our homes, in our businesses, on the road, okay, that the fire service start to take a look at what the hazmat has hazmat side. Assign a science or research officer for someone who can obtain these reference sources and provide information to the incident commander of like, hey, this is the vehicle, this is where the shutoff valves are, this is where you can and can't cut, you should not lift or stabilize here. Okay, but assigning someone who could get that information through a tablet or a laptop and get that incident commander and work with them on these vehicles. Okay, pre-incident planning. Get to know your community. If you have a filling station, take an evening, go sit at your filling station and watch as these trucks come in and fill up. Talk with the truck drivers. Okay, develop. If you don't have them in place, there's plenty of standard operating procedures, standard operating guidelines for these types of vehicles. A good standard operating guideline or standard operating procedure provides you a little bit of a training or a playbook to get everybody on the same page. Okay, so one of the ones here is if you take your FDNY, has fire tactics and procedures, hazardous materials, and they cover compressed natural gas vehicles, methane gas types vehicles, propane. They have a thing on here. Here's another one that I came across. But start to take a look at your standard operating procedures. Develop some kind of a plan. Okay. Resources, which we already got into that, okay, on these types of vehicles. All right. So just stressing some things that we need to do ahead of time to prepare ourselves. It's a low frequency, but high severity or high concern for this. So let's, as we go in through this, let's close a little bit on this webinar. We're going to finish up probably the last half hour or 45 minutes on response. Okay. So I just want to pack up. I'm going to stray off here a little bit. For that, many of you have known, if you sat in on Commissioner Mann's and these Provident webinars, they always talk about the NIOSH 5. Okay. And you could take a look at this. And I'm sure some of you could think off the top of your heads that we have seen involving these, especially the compressed natural gas vehicles, firefighters getting injured. Okay, so you take a look at this thing, improper risk assessment, not taking the time to get an idea of what we have, what's the hazards, what's the behavior, and everything like that. Lack of incident command, lack of accountability, inadequate communications, lack of SOPs, and following your established SOP. So you can see all 5 of these in some ways we can apply to these alternative vehicles. Okay, and I'm talking about drone. I know we've all been through the EV hybrid vehicles. Okay, but applying these to that. All right, strain off a little bit more. Don't get into tunnel vision on these, especially these larger trucks. Okay, this is a safety bulletin that came out by Los Angeles where they talk about with these large trucks the tire hazards, or this heavy equipment where we have the tire failures. So one of the reasons Los Angeles put this out, they had a front loader fire at a mine. It blew up, the tire blew up and killed a firefighter. And this which led them to talk a bit about these heavy tire trucks. So take time, get a hold of this and look at this document, review it. Another thing, I know this doesn't apply, very important things. A lot of these alternative fuel vehicles may start out as a cargo or trailer load, or they may spread to the cargo trailer load. This came out here on probably about within the past month or two. I'm not sure the exact date, but this is a NIOSH fatality report. I'm sure many have seen this incident of a Georgia firefighter. I believe he's a battalion chief who was killed at a tractor trailer fire involving this cargo where there was an over pressurization of that container. Okay, so don't get that tunnel vision going to these incidents and being so concerned about the fuel system. Yes, they're important. Don't forget about the tires, the other hazards, the loading and everything too. All right. So if you're interested in that, here's another really good video that came out. This is on YouTube on tactics of dealing with smoking cargo trailers. All right. So just wanted to divert a little bit, promote that there's more than just the hazards with these fuels and other learning opportunities. So let's get back into it. Pretty much these vehicles are very similar or to regular internal combustion engine, diesel, gasoline. However, they have these hazards. Obvious, the flammable gas, the high pressure, the levy hazard, the cryogenic, the rapid phase transition, okay, frostbite. All these are hazards. So we got to have an understanding of these too. All right. So as part of our response is how we respond. I'm going to go back here a little bit. Assign a research or science officer. Okay. Always consider alternative energy sources until he thoroughly ruled out. That could be motor vehicle accident, motor vehicle fires, structure fires, automatic fire alarms. We need to start putting alternative energy part things in our size up. Okay, we understand the solar panels, these battery energy storage systems, but start thinking that way too to rule out the hazard, because often they overlook. So one of the things on example is what's called emergency response guidebook for these vehicles, and it's basically what I call a safety data sheet. It shows you the tanks, where the shutoffs are, and the hazard. This is just one sample of a page from it. Okay, there's also, as I pointed out, the Hexagon Agility First Responder Guide for these systems, these quick cards that they have out there for us. Okay, I know the one thing I want to talk about here is obviously the ERG bulk is more for, okay, bulk loading, okay, or bulk shipment of these materials. Okay, as noted at the beginning of the presentation, Guide 115 is what we use for compressed natural gas, liquefied natural gas, and propane. Okay, I just want to call attention to a few things in this ERG book that relates to this topic. Okay, so one thing on here, if you look on this ERG book, all right, you see under fires involving tank, cold containers with flooding quantities of water until well after the fire is out. Okay, just remember, okay, thermal activated pressure relief devices. If you start flooding that tank, you start flooding those thermal devices, you keep them cold that they don't activate and you have a pressure. So just be cautious on that type of hazard. All right. So as we see in this video, we need to take a look, especially with the off-gassing or these PRDs, life safety concerns, property exposure, where we're staging our apparatus and personnel. These incidents can be far-reaching, anywhere at 80 to 100 feet, okay? So we need to consider all that. So basically, Hazmat 101. Approach upwind, uphill, stay away from possible gases, spills, or leaks. Be aware of these pressure relief devices, the jet fires, the releasing of the gases. 300, if you look in the ERG, 330 feet in all direction. Get that safe playing field. Get all unnecessary people out of that area. Ensure anybody who does enter that is wearing correct personal protective equipment and are taking a proper working procedures. All right. This is just something that I picked up at one of the hazmat conferences. I believe that was developed through the National Fire Academy in their Hazardous Material Incident Commander. But it's just talking a little bit about incident priorities. Okay, obviously with these, life safeties are number one. Incident stabilization, property environmental protection. That's known as LIP. You can kind of see as you follow this, you arrive on scene, you assess the product, the container, the environment, the facts, sciences. You analyze the problems, analyze the hazards. You make your decision based on the thing. You develop it, your incident action plan, you implement the response, you assess your progress, you maintain situational awareness. Okay, so just sort of visual. This is not something that I own or develop. It's just something through the National Fire Academy that provides a good type of visualization of these types of incidents. All right, we're dealing with flammable gases. Okay, detection and monitoring sampling equipment is important. Okay, if we have a leak involving these vehicles or we have a fire that we're doing monitoring. Okay, I'm a big proponent about layering detection devices. Okay, majority of us have the multi-gas meter MSA industrial scientific array where it does a percent LEL, H2S, oxygen. Okay, remember that device is an area monitoring. It's not always going to detect low levels. That's why when we go to these gas leaks, we can smell the gas, or we know there's a gas leak, but we're not getting hit. And the gas company shows up with their device and they get a hit. That's because they're using a leak detection device, which is the devices here. It's a different detection technology. All right. So I'm a big proponent. So particularly with my fire department, okay, we run the multi-gas meter area monitoring. We run this leak detector. Another interesting device, okay, you'll see here, this is a methane leak detector, and it uses a laser, and it only detects methane, and it can shoot up to 100 feet. So if I have a truck that has compressed natural gas on it or liquefied natural gas, I could stay back 100 feet and scan that truck, and it'll tell me if there's a leak coming from it. So if my particular department, we use it for natural gas leaks. If we go to a natural gas leak on a odor investigation in a neighborhood, we can scan the sidewalk, the road, to check for leaks with that laser. We could stand from the street if there's no curtains on the windows and shoot that laser into the window, and it'll tell us if there's gas inside that structure. Okay. Of course, there's uses with the thermal imager camera and also with the leak detection and our senses. Look, listen, feel, okay, see things, okay, hear things. You hear the leaks. If there's a gas leak, you may see flies flying over the area of the gas leak. All right, so I'm getting off my detection and monitoring sampling. So let's get a little bit about the initial response to these incidents. Okay, as it says in here, LIP. Life safety is our number one with these incidents. Our own life safety as responders and the public. Once we take care of that, what can we do to stabilize this incident? Okay, then we move down to property conservation. Okay, just looking at this thing. When we get to these scenes, everyone wearing personal protective equipment, proper apparatus of placement. Okay, if these incidents are on highways, set up traffic management system. And this can even be in for a parking lot. Set up that playing field. Okay. And I'm sure we don't see a day in this country that we don't see a firefighter, police officer, or a tow truck operator being struck by traffic at incident scenes. So get that good playing field set up. Okay. As with anything, do your 360 size up, identifying life safety hazard. Take a look at the vehicles, exposure, identify your hazards, have an understanding of your hazard. Just get a full picture of what's going on. Okay, that all goes back to that NIOSH top 5, inadequate hazard assessment. Get a full picture and a thorough understanding of what you have going on with these incidents. Okay, so this is something that comes from the NFPA manual or booklet, student manual on responding this. So basically, identify, immobilize, and disable. So we want to identify the vehicle type, the fuel type, etc. We want to immobilize, basically prevent it from moving. We want it to disable and shut down the vehicle and secure our fuel sources. Okay, all this is we must have plans in place, okay? Assignments, okay? Thing I like to verify too, trust but verify. If the driver tells you I shut off the valves or did this, trust but verify, okay? Because you want to make sure that the valves are shut and they didn't make any mistakes in the incident. All right. Basically, a hazmat 101 stuff. We have all learned the 7 clues. Not going to read through all this, but you can see how we apply occupancy and location. So we talked at the beginning, highway. A lot of us identify highway or roadway systems where these things are coming through. Truck stops, parking lots. Okay, take a look at the containers, the vehicle designs, the fuel management system, refueling connection, fuel lines, markings and colors, brandings, marketing, emblems, think green, think clean. We run on clean burning natural gas vehicle. We'll talk a little bit about the placards and labels, the blue diamonds at the back of the vehicle indicating CNG, LPG, or LNG. Written resources, the manufacturer response guide. I also throw in there interviewing the driver. Our senses, looking at fire and leak behavior, hearing that leak gas noise, that jet flames, little or no smoke, and I'll show you some examples of that. And getting to our modern detection devices, flammable gas sensors, Cadillac bead, metal oxide, using our thermal imager camera. All right, as I said, identification. We want to use as much things that we can. The driver, badging and labeling, okay, branding and marketing, the containers, the fuel system, fire and leak behavior, doing that 360, getting a thorough understanding of what we're dealing with. As I go back to it, consider alternative energy until you thoroughly roll it out, okay? Here's an example. These are the blue diamonds. You're going to typically find them on the back passenger side of the vehicle or maybe on the container themselves, depending on it. So the top is for LNG. I'm sorry, I missed the CNG is wrong on that. The LNG, the propane. Then you can see the DOT. This is more for bulk loads. All right. So this is just examples. Looking at clues like this, the diamonds. Okay. It may say at the fuel port, LPG only. These are different clues that we can use when you're doing your 360 to give us an idea. All right, so if we take an example here, this is Home City Ice. This is my own hometown. Here's that blue diamond, okay? It's in the back of the vehicle. How well are you going to see that if it's a fire, low light, or the vehicle's overturned on its right side? Okay, so that's why it's important to look at other things. So looking, you see the CNG, looking for that box with the cylinders in it, looking for that lack of there is a fuel container here, but it's more for the refrigeration system on it. All right, another example, LNG on the tanks, propane, but just look at as many clues as possible. All right. So as we talk with staging and approaching, one thing they talk about is approaching these vehicles at a 45-degree angle, being aware of these PRD flame hazards and everything too. The one thing I want to stress too, the 45-degree approach is due to like the PRDs and everything too. We remember that if we have a BLEVE concern, there's no safe area around a container that can BLEVE. Okay, so that goes back to some basic things that there is no safe area if we have a BLEVE hazard or concern. All right, so this 45 basically applies more to the pressure relief devices activated. All right, we want to make sure we, as part of mobilization, we chock the wheels with appropriate size chocks. Okay, especially if these are heavy-duty trucks, where we shouldn't really be using the wheel chocks that we use for our passenger vehicles. We engage the parking brakes. We place the vehicle in park or neutral, depending on that. We disable the vehicle. We turn off the vehicle ignition. We may turn off, disconnect the battery terminals. Okay, especially one thing we may want to look at, especially on these larger trucks, more than one battery. Okay, that's something that maybe we need to take a little bit of training of how to understand to disable these multiple battery type systems. Okay, next thing, we want to disable the vehicle fuel flow. We saw that quarter turn on the CNG, the shut-off valve on the propane and LNG. So turning off the valve, okay, shuts off that fuel securement and everything too. Okay, on that. Then basically general emergency operations. Always treat these cylinders or tanks as if they're pressurized, even if there's evidence that the PRD or the TPRD has activated. Okay, not all cylinders may vent, which I already stressed to you. Remember, these PRDs are only for one cylinders, not for the whole system. Okay, the PRDs, the pressure activated, can reset and close. Also on these temperature ones, they do stay open, but you may get where they blow off gas, then they may shut off and reignite. So they may blow on and off. So don't get under false security if you think these things are shut down. Get a hose line established. I'm a big proponent also, in addition to hose line, get portable fire extinguishers. That gives us some more options or more firepower and ensure people are wearing the correct PPE. We're dealing with flammable gases. Identify and control your ignition sources. Okay, flames, electrical arcing. Okay, if there's damage in the area of these containers, assume that the container is damaged as well. Okay, as unlike structures with the natural gas, we do have a limited supply. So if these things are burning off or venting off, they're eventually going to dissipate the gas and improve the situation for us. Also, we'll talk about this at the end of it, about secondary responders. Okay, make sure you notify the tow operators what you have. If the police department's going to impound the vehicle, need to make sure they have an understanding, hey, this is an alternative fuel vehicle. They may not want to be taking a CNG vehicle that is damaged and putting it inside their impoundment building. It should be outside. All right. So let's talk about some very generic response. Motor vehicle accidents. Okay. Extrication, very simple. It remains the same as just as a conventional vehicle. The fuel components, the lines are not typically put in those areas where we cut. Okay. But we still got to do the peek and peel, expose that area, look where we're cutting to make sure we're not cutting into it. We should never cut into these fuel lines, particularly the CNG high pressure. We want to make sure that we do stabilization. Okay, we don't place the stabilization equipment against any cylinders or tanks or fuel lines. If we have CNG tanks on top of the vehicle, that kind of changes the center of gravity of these vehicles, and we may have to alter how we stabilize it because the vehicle may be top heavy with stabilization. All right, so already got that. Cylinders, as I said, these cylinders are maintained to maintain their structural integrity. Okay, always be aware that physical damage could result in some kind of a failure or gas release. Okay, and also the gas lines. Natural gas will rise. It's usually not found in the point, but it can, if it's in an enclosed area. Okay, it may collect. So if it's inside of a building, or if it's maybe underneath a bridge area where you have a collision on a bridge or tunnel, we have that concern of the gas building up inside. LNG, okay, are very strong due to their double wall thing. The one thing that will be indicated, if there is some kind of a failure or punching, you may see some kind of a frosting on the damaged area of the tank, okay, indicating that there's a leak, okay. This could occur if the outer walls breach, okay, it's zero. So just be careful with your assessing your LNG containers, okay? LNG will not leave the tank in a liquid state because it vaporizes very quickly, okay? As I said, it will exit. It may, due to the coolness of the fuel, it's going to stay a little low until it warms up. Then it's going to rise, okay? I said here, be aware too. Remember, I told you these LNG have gas detection devices, but if we disable the low voltage system, we essentially disable those gas detection devices. Okay, and just make sure your firefighters are aware that the LNG is a cryogenic liquid. It could have some damaging to their turnout gear or their skin if they come in direct contact with it. All right. So the one thing is we're going to talk a little bit about this under the ERG. And this is one of the things that came out in the newest ERG pertaining to LNG. Okay. So in Guide 115, they added things about LNG gas. Okay. So if you have LNG gas released near water, it will vaporize very quickly. Okay. So it says here, do not use water, use a dry chemical or high expansion foam. So you can see the various things they call out with this hazard. And this is known as rapid phase transition. So essentially what that is, the LNG is so cold, okay, we have a sudden and explosive vaporization liquid when it comes in contact with warmer environment like water, okay? And this basically generates a significant amount of vapor in a short time and leading to physical explosion. So I did have one video to show, and this will be my last video I show here. But this is going to show a little bit of them testing and showing what can happen to LNG.
I'm walking alone, the streets are empty. The only And I can see it's my own silhouette. I'm getting stronger, step by step. The clock is ticking, but there's no time for me. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe trying to protect your soul. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Yeah. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Feel like a dynamite.
Okay, so that was just a example of what LNG can do when it comes in contact with water. Okay, so with LP, propane, we can have a release. Okay, same things with the others. Control your ignition source. Okay, with propane, if possible, especially if we have a leak, we may be able to disperse the vapors with a hose line, but that's with propane. Okay, with fires. Okay, one thing that, especially with these garbage truck drivers, they are instructed, okay, if they get a fire in their waste hauling or compaction area, they will dump the load, and this could be any type of diesel type trucks too. They will dump the load to protect it. Okay. One idea is they're dumping the load to get that heat and fire away from those compressed natural gas cylinders. All right. If you're not familiar, and I'm sure Chris Fatt talked about this, and several other people have talked about this, there's an increase of fires in the waste industry because of lithium ion batteries being thrown away improperly, being thrown in garbage. These compactors apply mechanical stress. The lithium ion battery goes into thermal runaway, ignites the garbage. Okay, so I have that understanding what's going on. Okay, so with fire incidents, we want to make sure we determine the type of fuels or fuels and type. We wanted to see, is it involving the fuel system, or is it involving just the tires, the compartment, and electrical? Is there any fire or heat impingement on the fuel storage system or system components? And do we have any life safety concerns or exposure concerns? Okay, so one thing we could kind of look with, particularly with the CNG, is understanding of fire and smoke behavior. All right, so if I just have compressed natural gas involved, I'm going to have flaming torches. I'm going to have little to no smoke, and I may have an audible release here. So you can kind of see with this picture. All right, obviously, this is the natural gases on fire. If the waste was on fire, which it could be, what the smoke would be a lot darker. So let's take a look a little bit more at this. All right, so let's take a look at this. Up on top of this truck, we have compressed natural gas, but the fire is down here. So most likely, if we look at the smoke, this is involving the tires, the engine, okay? It could be into the low pressure type system. And the one thing we got to understand too is with these fires, especially in the low pressure system, I may put this out, but if there's a gas leak in the low pressure side, it's going to reignite. So you got to make sure you secure and shut the gas off before you extinguish this. Same thing here is just a close up. You could see the CNG, it's off, but it has very little smoke, and you can see the jet flaming on that. On the bus, very obvious. You can see the PRDs, the jet flames. You can see some darker smoke because it's gotten into the compartment of the bus and the components of the bus. All right, so you have a mixture of the gas and the smoke. All right, this one's a little bit more of a challenge, and actually I don't know if this is really a CNG garbage truck or not, but you could see by the smoke and fire behavior. All right. This is that one from Chesapeake, Virginia, very obviously. It started out as a hydraulic leak. You set counts for the fire down here on the bottom. Okay. But you can see here where you have that flaming thing. So taking that time approaching and having an understanding what's involved in it. As said, the best case scenario is protect your exposure, take care of life safety, and let these things continue to burn. And once they burn their fuel out, we can move in and handle them just like any other vehicle. All right. Same thing here too. You can see compressed natural gas. It's not really involved in it. It's more of an engine compartment fire. Okay. So we would want to hit this with the stream, being very careful of applying any water to the tanks or the cylinders or the PRDs up there, or the temperature pressure relief devices. All right. So as I said, we already talked about the CNG. CNG will not levy because it's not a liquid, it's a gas. If we're able to, we extinguish the fire by stopping the flow of the gas. Okay. If we can't stop the flow of the gas, do not extinguish the fire. Let it burn. Okay. And as it says in here, do not apply water to the compressed natural gas. As firefighters, and I've run into this a lot of times, and it comes back to, which I think is our basic firefighting classes. We take our essentials of firefighting, our basic firefighting, and we talk about Class B gas fires, and we're told, yeah, you don't extinguish them, but if you have a cylinder, you have people who want to throw water on that, which is not a good thing. So they got to make sure they differentiate. If they have CNG involved, they do not want to throw water on compressed natural gas cylinders. Propane, LNG, yes, they're fine. Okay. So for example, I do like a tabletop exercise with like a little town and model trucks. And the fire department I went to, I set up a scenario of a compressed natural gas truck fire in a parking lot. Their immediate thing was, I gave them an engine and truck. Their thing is they hit a hydrant, put the ladder truck up in the air, and put the master stream down and flooding large quantities of water on that. And they thought, well, that's what we were taught to do, is if we have any gas cylinders involved. And I had to explain to them the concerns of that. All right. I said, do not approach the vehicle 10 or 15 minutes. I'm a big proponent on the 330 feet. Most places say 80 to 100 feet, but the 330 feet, the 80 to 100 feet is more for the jet flames. The 330 feet is more for that pressurized vessel failing. So I'm going to kind of judge my distance a little bit and basically allow it to burn. Okay. And just be aware, if there's no if there's no container or no flame impingement, treat it as the same thing. Get the fire knocked down, but make sure you're monitoring what's going on with those containers and the temperature relief devices, and don't get any water on those containers. LNG, same thing, standard tactics. If it's on fire, allow it to burn. Okay. As I said here, they're well insulated. They are very like to increase pressure, but however, like the stress. If there's impact damage or some kind of a failure to that tank shell or any other components, that changes the whole ballpoint. So always don't get under a false sense of security because it's a double wall tank and cryogenic that all is going to be good. Okay. And I said, if there's an increase of pressure, the relief device will activate. It'll access off and reset. Okay. You can apply water to the tank. And also I go with this too, is with LNG and propane, is if we're cooling those tanks to prevent levy, consider putting unmanned hand lines. Okay. And getting our people out of that danger zone, if that's the one thing that we're doing with these. Same thing pretty much with the propane. Just don't extinguish the fire unless you can shut the gas off. Let it burn itself off and be aware of the levy incident. Okay, so just to close this out, Sam and Ed, this is pretty much my last slide. But the thing is with these post incidents, we just can't let these vehicles go. Okay, they need to be properly secured, especially if there's damage to these containers, because we don't want these vehicles to return and go somewhere where they can cause harm. So It might be working with a fleet company or another company to get the gas taken off of these things and get them properly rendered safe. It may be your hazmat team, having sure that your tow operators do. So that I think that's one of the big challenges is the tow truck operators are just going to want to hook a truck to these things and tow them somewhere, but don't care about if there's a tank failure that could potentially happen hours, weeks, or days later on these incidents. Okay. And I'm at the end and thank you. So I don't know if there's any questions or anything. I'll be happy to take any questions or anything
All
if there are
right,
any.
Jim, you want to turn your camera back on. I'm going to go up here. Our friend Phil Washington, who joins us month after month, asked the question, where can we get a copy of the books you mentioned at the beginning of your program? If you can send a link to Sam, we can include that in the episode notes tomorrow when we send the email out.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. And I thought about doing that, Ed.
That'd be
But
great.
yeah, I'll get that to Sam this evening or early tomorrow morning, the links to the reference
Okay.
materials.
So Jetty asked the question, and I'm assuming he's from the Netherlands based on another comment he made, and I'll get to it in a second. What was the gas leak in flies? Could you please explain?
What basically, if we take our natural gas and propane, we add a mercaptan to it and we get that rotten egg smell. Okay. One of the indicators that could possibly happen is if you have a gas leak that's happening, you have that rotten egg smell and it may start to attract flies. So, for example, if I have an underground natural gas leak in somebody's yard, it may kill the grass, but in the area of that gas leak, I may start to see flies hovering over it because they think it's some kind of a dead animal or some decaying carcass.
Okay. So Jetty made the comment, nice to see the RPT videos from the Netherlands Fire Academy. I was present during this demo. Very, very impressive and unexpected. And this was the first demo, and we had not yet any experience with it. Water that was applied to the LNG pool immediately froze, and the LNG gas that was released under the ice broke the ice and sent pieces of it all around, combined with huge flames. A one-time experience not to be repeated in this way. So
that is awesome to hear that. That's
thank you
awesome.
for the experiment, and thank you for telling everybody that you've only done it once and you're not going to repeat it in the same way. Let's see. We did it in the Q&A. How long have the methane only detectors been available?
That the remote methane detector that I mentioned, there's a couple different companies, but they've been out about 3 to 5 years. They use a laser. There's a couple different ones out there, and it's a phenomenal device. It only detects methane gas, but it has a laser, and it's incredible technology. I equate it to when thermal imagers came out. When I came into fire service, thermal imager cameras were $30,000-$40,000, and now we're getting them for $5,000, $3,000, or $8,000. This methane detectors are about anywhere from 10 to 15,000, but hopefully the price starts to come down because I think any department should have it because you get that standoff distance with it.
Okay. So one of the things I would throw out as a suggestion to our listeners is, I know when the gas industry became a big deal here in Pennsylvania years ago, I mean, things have settled down. A lot of times if you reach out to those folks and say, hey, you have a lot of this methane in our area, would you consider making a donation to us so we could purchase one of these methane gas meters? You might be surprised how helpful they would be to help you with the purchase of those. There's a comment in here, police and tow truck people really need to take this class. Look, folks, Jim threw a lot of information at you tonight. My suggestion, and one of the things I take from it is reach out to the industry in your backyard now and get additional training. Do some pre-fire planning, learn as much about this as you can up front. And, don't be afraid to invite the police and the tow truck operators in your first two area to come to a class if you get the gas industry involved in it. I mean, there was a lot of information thrown at you tonight. But one thing I take from it is I think we all have some more to learn, especially with the LNG and the CNG. You know, a lot of fire departments might be good with the propane because we've dealt with it for years, but the CNG and stuff, well, that's new to a lot of us, and it might be a good time to start learning more of it. So I don't see it. Well, let's see something. Thanks for the answer to the question. One of the best webinars I've participated in recently. Thank you for being with us, Wayne. So we're going to move along here. I don't see anything else in the Q&A. I don't see anything. Someone's suggesting maybe we expand in the series. We'll talk about that going into next year. So, Jim, I want to thank you for a great presentation. I'm sure many of our listeners have picked up on some tips that will help keep them safe and alive. And that's the primary reason we do these, is to keep you safe and alive. I just want to remind our audience there'll be a brief survey we would like you to complete. Keep an eye on your email from me that'll have your certificate of attendance attached for tonight's webinar. Again, tonight's episode will be uploaded to providentins.com, so you can go back and watch it at any time or show it to the rest of your department. You'll receive that link in the email within the next day. Please make sure you check your spam or junk email before you send me an email saying you haven't got your certificate. For those of you who use the webinar as training for a group of people, when you receive the thank you email for joining us from Sam, there'll be an Excel spreadsheet attached. Please use this to send the names and email addresses for use on the certificates. It makes life easier for me when I'm doing the certificates. You can preview or review previous webinars at www.providentins.com and use the training resources link in the upper right-hand corner of the page. By the way, in case you don't know it, I also hosted our monthly Station 1902 podcast where I interview subject matter experts on a variety of topics. You can listen to the recorded podcasts in your favorite podcast app. You can also find them at www.providentins.com. And Sam will include that link in your episode notes tomorrow when it comes out. Mark your calendars for October the 28th when I host a webinar with Tim Tharp titled PPE for the Mind, the essential gear you don't get issued. The podcast I recorded with Tim earlier this month will air early in October. I'm going to make an editorial comment here, and I don't mean to offend anybody when I make it. But when we have these podcasts with, like tonight with Jim, where there's a lot of fire stuff involved in it, we get a lot of attendance. The one we're doing next month deals with mental health and behavioral health, and our attendance at those sometimes is pretty terrible. Folks, if you haven't been paying attention, suicide is outpacing line of duty deaths in our business. And the webinar we're doing next month, Tim's going to talk about those kinds of tools that we can give our people to keep them from ever considering suicide. To the point that Tim made when we did our podcast with one another. You know, when you go to fire school, we give you turnout gear. We teach you how to use an air pack. We teach you how to squirt water. We teach you how to climb a ladder. But we don't do a very good job of teaching you or giving you tools to help you with your mental health as you move through this profession, through this career. So I'm asking you, spread the word. If you're a leader, I'd like to see us have 150, 200 plus people on next month's webinar as well. Until we meet again, stay safe for your family's sake.